I got a lot of different projects that I make that I end up stuffing into one-size-fits-all plastic boxes. Some of my projects never actually make it off of the development board. It's time to take a new direction. Delving into the world of the latest 3D printers where the information overload is overwhelming and generally inaccurate. I knew enough to know that I didn't have the ventilation for a resin printer. I knew that Creality's, pretty much out of date at this point with their Ender 3. I also learned that Amazon is not the place to go to about 3D printers. Prices maybe, sales perhaps, but information, no. YouTube, again, was overwhelming. People were getting printers for free from the companies to review them, having no problems with them, but then if you did some digging and research, you're seeing all these problems, and you wonder how the people on YouTube who did the reviews never saw these issues. Reddit proved to be a good source of information in finding problems about particular printers, having narrowed down a short list of printers I was already interested in purchasing. This includes price, customer service, reliability, tinkering, and known issues. I had narrowed it down to the Neptune 4 Pro for my needs based on all of the aforementioned things I was looking for in a printer, but a couple of problems with the software and the leveling and the Z-axis and this thing with Clipper that's currently going on. People say, you gotta mess with it and do stuff, and that's how it is with a 3D printer. But I don't want to tinker with my 3D printer. I want it to work out of the box so I could make my projects and then I could print stuff for them. And everybody on every group, in every medium, all responds the same way to that comment. If you want a printer that works out of the box without any problems, you're getting one from Bambu Labs. So that's what I did. And I opted to go with their P1P, which is the middle of the road. And while I did, sacrifice on the price somewhat, which is twice as much as the other printer, there's a lot of stuff that it comes with that I probably would have ended up paying for it down the road. Probably not $300 worth, but enough to shore up the difference somewhat. And it's purported to be plug and play, so let's find out. A spot is cleared in the lab. It arrived within a week from UPS. Let's unbox our Bambulab P1P printer. A quick start guide is provided on top. I'll be using it throughout the video. A box containing a bunch of other items. I'll put it off to the side for now. All of the packaging and cable ties are now removed except for under the tray. I'll now inventory the contents of this box. A spool of PLA Basic, random color happens to be green. 2 Allen keys and an unclogging tool. A power cord. An extra PTFE tube. A spool holder. Some documentation in a bag. The display. And a smaller box full of even smaller things. We got a bunch of things inside this box. We'll have a look now. The PTFE tube anchor, an extra 0.4mm print head, nozzle wiping pads, a scraper kit as well as a side kit and other screws and parts needed for assembly, a package of thermal grease, glue stick for the build plate, and 5 packs of lubricant grease. We'll sort it all out and continue with the assembly. This cable tie removal as well as the foam removal I'd already done during the unpackaging. So I'm going to install the spool holder now. The top of the spool holder clearly indicated. There's a bag that says spool holder. It's got the 2 screws for it. The larger hex key removed from the other bag will be used throughout this build. I'll have to remove this screw from the chassis before I screw in the other side. Next will be the PTFE tube anchor. It screws in up here in the top corner. These screws tighten as such that the anchor can still swivel once everything's tightened down. It should move freely just like this. This PTFE tube can now be lifted out of the chassis. I'll unwrap it from here and insert this tube into that piece that I've just installed till it can't be seated any further. It's a one-way seat, so it'll stay in there. Make sure it's seated tightly. The other side of the PTFE tube will be fed into here, pushed down until it will go no further, making sure everything fits tight. There are 3 shipping screws here annotated in orange holding this plate into position. They need to be removed now. Next, we'll be unpackaging the display and installing it into the printer. First, connecting this cable. It's keyed, it only goes in one direction. Pressing it in until it snaps. The display panel will then be lined up with those 4 holes, pushed in and then to the left to lock it into position. It's time to connect our power cable and fire it up. A warning to read the manual first, and it's a good idea. We hit next, and we get another reminder to remove those 3 bed screws. We hit next, choose our local region, and then select it. Now we're told to scan the QR code to configure the Wi-Fi using the app. There's a QR code in the book for the app for convenient installation. Opening right up to the App Store, I install it now, and then I open it. After which I agree to the terms and service and allow notifications. A message indicates that it would like to find Bambu devices on the network. I allow it. When I click on devices, it takes me to a login screen. Having previously made an account with Bambu, I log in now. After clicking on the agreement, it jumps right into add a printer and asks if I want to use Bluetooth. Clicking OK, it finds my printer. So I select that printer, accept even more terms and services, and bind. There is then a Bluetooth pairing request with a number. I hit pair. Once again on the printer. Select my home network, and then I'll enter my password. Then I'll press bind. Confirming once more that the 3 bolts are removed. I keep hitting the back button to go back to the main screen, and here we are with my printer idle. It now asks to hit the start button to run a self-test, and I'll tell you in the documentation and in the program, there's no other place you'll ever find self-test except for right here, which wasn't helpful because mine failed. But if you don't retry here after it fails and you're confident that everything works, once you leave here or hit ignore, you're going to have to restart the entire printer over and reconfigure everything to get the self-test again to retest this, because again, there's no menu option that says self-test, and it may be renamed something else in this printer. I've actually reinitialized this whole printer just to get back here again to make sure everything worked from the beginning, and self-test did run the second time without any errors. But I don't know why you can't redo self-test after you've left that menu. But having completed self-test, it asks if you want to check for firmware updates, which it did find, and starts to update my firmware automatically off the network. Following a quick reboot, it then goes and asks you if you want to join the diagnostic club. I went and skipped this one. I'm going to sit this one out, and the printer is now ready to print. With the tray lifted, I can now remove the last 2 pieces of foam from the bottom. I just wanted to document one of the shady things I saw on one of the subsequent reinitializations and re-self-tests. That right there, that was really weird. But it worked after that, self-test completed without any issue. It reminded me of a Commodore 1541 drive, not knowing what track it was on, so the heads would smack into the end of the drive till it found track 0. I'm satisfied after 3 reinitializations and 3 tests that it's working, so we're going to move on. The printer comes with a roll of PLA Basic. The color is random. Mine happens to be green. Desiccant is included. It's definitely enough to get you going, do some tests, print out the examples, make a couple mistakes. I'll just place it right on the holder. Snip off that first piece with the tape on it. And then I'll push it all the way up the tube until it comes to a stop. I'm going to break here for a moment and install the software on my desktop. I went and downloaded the Mac version of Bambu Studio from the website and was greeted with a few simple questions upon installation. My region, I did not want to join the experience program, and then what my printer selection is. There's a whole lot of printers here that are selected by default, so I unselected all of them except for mine at 0.4 millimeter. I figured that would probably be for the best and hit next. Then it had another menu for filament selection, and it had a bunch of default settings. I really don't know what type of filament I'm going to be using beyond the default provided filament at this time, so I'm going to leave this alone for now, and I'm just going to safely hit next. I'll definitely be wanting to install the network plugin. It tells you all the functions that you can have with the network plugin. It's already selected, so I'll hit finish, and it's going to download that network plugin for installation. It finished, and I hit close, after which I'll need to log in or register, but I have an account, so I'm going to log in now, agree to yet another privacy policy, and sign in. Now it'll ask if I want to synchronize to the cloud, and I hit yes, and we're connected to the printer, the cloud, and ready to go. I click on the device menu, and it does see the printer environmental conditions on the right-hand side, as well as the lamp, the camera, printing options, as well as calibration. The AMS would be shown here for we're connected. We're just rolling with the single spool, no pun intended. And we can see I could control the lamp from here. It takes a bit, and we can see the lamp shut off. And I click it again, and after a little bit, the lamp turns back on. Up on the top here, I see options for time lapse, as well as off to the left of it, micro SD card, showing the card is installed in the unit. Interesting note, as I click on micro SD card here, it says initialization failed, not supported on the current printer version. I find this to be particularly strange, as I will show later why. Updates to the printer can be done in the next menu option. And HMS returns nothing. It must not be for my printer. I click on preview, whose UI looks very much like prepare, all of which we're going to go into later. I don't want to go too much into the weeds on this program just yet. Up top, there's also another menu for the calibration of filament. If you use a different filament, a special option to calibrate that filament. Incidentally, the main page has the option to create a new project, open a project, or pull one of the online models from their website. I've installed Bambu Handy on my iPad as well. Sadly, it only works in portrait mode, which I'm not happy about. This. We're ready. I wasn't quite sure of the instructions here where it said to bring it up to a certain temperature based on your filament and bring the plate up to a certain temperature, because I figured that would have been taken care of by the project we were going to load next. But I followed along anyway to the best of my ability and brought this up to about 220 by, I believe, 22 degrees centigrade. Once at temperature, I directed it to feed some filament through several times as instructed, and that was probably to make sure the feeding mechanism and the print head was working properly. And we could see here some of it coming out the bottom. And I would burn in 3D printer hell if I did not make the Benchy that came on the SD card. It's like the hello world of 3D printers. But it's a good idea too, because it was made for this printer, and if there's any problem printing this, there's going to be a problem printing anything. And I am recording this on the camera. I've set that up, as well as my camera, because I didn't know what the results are going to be on the video. So they're both being done in tandem. Notice as the file is loading, the temperature is changing for the print head as well as the plate, all pre-programmed in the project file. I don't know what that is right there that just flew off of there, but that's fine. And we could see it auto-purging at the beginning of each project. It leaves little poops behind the printer. There's a little door back there. When it cools down, it knocks them off. Right there was just knocked off and fell out back onto the table. So I've got it set that every single time it starts a project, it does a complete calibration to ensure that everything is squared away on the plate, all these distances. You can see it taking measurements, and then every couple of intervals, it's like a diagonal. You could see it stops and it does this little shake, and there's some reverberation and whatnot going on. And then once it gets to the end, it draws this line up front, just like that, and then it starts the project. Now, the camera that we're seeing in the iPad on the top right, it's not live. It's like time delay. There's a couple different settings you could get with this camera that could provide the effect that you're looking for. I haven't really set it up. I've only set it up to function. I haven't gotten into how the features are going to look. But it's going to do this first layer, and then I'm not going to show this entire print on video. I'm just going to skip through this. Either that or greatly speed sections up. I just want to show it running from different angles on this one before we're able to show it from the actual camera, doing it like layer by layer or however it presents it when it shows it from its own camera. And you could expect that the benchy they provide is always going to be sliced exactly perfect for this printer to be as fast as possible to print and always look as good as possible, because it is in fact one of the more well-known benchmarks for speed and quality of a 3D printer. Everybody prints this and shows this to see how well a printer is printing and how fast it can do it. And this one is completed. Let's have a look at it. I waited several minutes for this to cool down. I was in no rush, so it shouldn't stick. It came right off with no problem at all. That bottom texture looks fantastic, and that first layer has no issues whatsoever. We take a close inspection under the magnifying glass, and we see, yeah, pretty much flawless. I don't see any issues with this print at all. I do see a couple of like little whiskers on the front here. That's about it. It could be due to humidity, but as far as the print goes, no problems. Making our way back to this SD card issue we found in the app, I want to talk about this now because I want to view the footage that was recorded by the camera on the printer. It seems to me like this is a bug. I'll show you why. Now here's the SD card on the printer, and I don't plan on inserting and removing it every single time I want to get data on and off this thing. It's ridiculous. But if I make my way down to the third menu option on the printer and make my way to the right, we could go down and I'll just highlight SD card. We could see that 1.8 gigs are already being used. But if I go up to wireless LAN and then make a right, we could see two things here. Number one is the IP address, and number two is this access code that I could keep refreshing. We want to keep in mind both of those values. I've downloaded an FTP suite that supports FTPS. This is FileZilla. On the top, I've typed for the host FTPS : / and the IP address. Username off to the right of that will be BBLP, and the password will be that random generated number that was on the screen. Pressing Quick Connect, we're connected to the printer over FTP and immediately have access to that SD card right here. On the left-hand side in my downloads directory, I'm going to create a new subdirectory, and I'm going to call that subdirectory Bambu. I'll go into that subdirectory now, and what I want to do on this side is move over a couple directories. One is time-lapse, and I highlighted recorder by mistake with it. I meant to take only time-lapse and then cam, but that's okay. I'll just speed things up, and when it's done, I'll pull the other directory, cam. And I'll let you know that these FTP transfers are not the quickest thing. I'll make my way up to cam now, pull that directory over. I'll delete the recorder directory when it's done, and then we'll come back when it's finished. We now see cam and time-lapse copied over. I removed recorder. So I'm going to minimize this FTP program now, and we're going to take a look at Finder, where we see the two directories. As I open up the AVI file on Mac, we see there are issues, but if I open up using VLC on Mac, which I've installed, there are no issues opening up with VLC other than a message that says that there's an indexing issue, but it's not a major problem. So I say build index, then play, and it records everything every time you hit the play button. It's a little snippet right there. We're after video number 5, which is the benchy video, and we're just looking to see how this camera operates. And immediately we could see that it runs at a much higher speed. It's not running at real time. Things are kicking off and the camera starts recording the second the printer gets underway. And we can see a little string that fell out there, and it's doing the initialization and the calibration is what's going on here. I'll speed through this right quick. And now we get to the actual printing on the camera, and this is running at the speed in which the camera recorded. I'm not speeding this portion up, but I will because you're generally using the camera to make some sort of video. We could see how well that would work. So I'm going to speed it up to 4 times. This is now running at 4 times the speed. This is now running at 8 times the recorded speed. So for making videos, this raw footage is pretty good. It appears that once a video hits 135.3 megs, it starts another file. We could see that this video here is a 3-file series, one printing event stitched together. As we look down below, we see the time-lapse videos are significantly smaller, and we'll take a look at one of the bigger ones. I've only done a couple, but this is some other test projects I did. And as I open it up, it's just taking pictures at certain intervals, probably at each step or a couple each step, to save on the video size and try and make a smoother finish. It's not like the head is always in the same position, but it's a lot smaller video to work with. And I'm not speeding up these examples. This is the speed in which it was recorded into the AVI file. If you're going to use these AVI files in a Mac, you're going to need to re-encode them into MP4. I'm using Handbrake here. It just takes a minute or so. And once I have that MP4, I'm able to import it into Final Cut Pro. No problem at all. Given all I've demonstrated, I can see zero reason why the micro SD card cannot be supported in the app. The next issue was my fault, but it seems to affect a lot of people. Let's take a look. The Benchy printed perfectly without any issues whatsoever. Let's look at the problem now. After I'd finished the Benchy, I attempted to print a ESP32 LilyGo TT5 case that I had downloaded, and we're going to watch here. I'm going to slow it down and see what happens. As it's printing, the corners are starting to lift off right over here, and luckily I was there to hit the cancel button, because this piece eventually detached and went flying into the other piece and could have made a big mess, but it didn't. And I was surprised because the thought that this would happen never even occurred to me. You can see the whole thing just bowed on both edges. I followed the usual guidances, shut off the fan as well as the cooling fan on the device, use isopropyl alcohol to clean the plate as good as possible. I thought about using the glue stick, but I really didn't want to use the glue stick. But the failures were stacking up, and I was getting a bit suspicious. This is another provided example on the SD card from Bambu. They're 3 cell phone holders, and they are extremely flat, a lot more flat than the case that I was making for the ESP32. And as we could see, the edges are not lifting at all. The problem does not appear when printing directly from the SD card. Again, I go to print one of mine immediately after, and immediately starts detaching from the plate. We can see the wings lifting up from this butterfly. It takes the butterfly with it, drags it around, and all sorts of calamity happens. My answer came from the Reddit Bambu group, which was staring me right in the face. We could see these markings on the front of the plate, and most importantly here, the Bambu textured PEI plate. With all these specific questions they ask you when you install the app, they never bother to ask you the type of plate they supplied your printer, which I think is kind of funny. So the program as installed happened to be configured with the right 0.4 nozzle, but by default it's listed as having the cool PLA plate, and we can see that this plate doesn't match my plate at all, and I need to set it for the textured PEI plate manually. I don't know why the initial configuration didn't ask which plate I had, and this is all I needed to do to fix this problem. Reprinting all of my work that had previously failed on multiple occasions without any issue. Success. And it came out nice. I didn't check all the details of the design. I just wanted to test something, but it got all the buttons and the switches, and it snaps shut, and it has room for the USB, so I'm happy with it. I'll consider this issue to be solved. At the end of the day, there's only 2 things you could do with a 3D printer: print stuff you made or print stuff other people made. The main page is integrated with MakerWorld, so we'll try that out, and I'm going to select more over here to open up the web page. Not as robust as some of the bigger Maker pages, but I've already selected something in here. We're not going to search through everything. It is a TTCO T-Display case for a TTCO T-Display. Here's one that I have. We're just going to print it out. I click Open in Bambu, and it says Import into Bambu, so it's all integrated. And then I have this allowance to open the link. OK to download. And it loads everything in. I did not realize that it changed my settings to the X1 carbon nozzle up top, and I changed my time lapse to smooth because that's what this test is all about. Notice this block here appears and is required for the smooth time lapse. So I do the slice, and I do the print plate, and I select send. Now I didn't realize it at the time, but this is probably because it is set up for the X1 carbon nozzle. I click OK, and I print it, sending it off. Turns out it did work fine, but if I had noticed that, that error probably wouldn't have been there. I didn't want to turn the camera on to see if just time-lapse was recorded, so all we're going to see from Bambu Studio is just the percentage go up, so we're not going to watch this. We'll see what the time-lapse looked like. And here it is, the smooth time-lapse video, and it looks pretty cool, but I don't understand why they could not coordinate the print head in the same location. Would have been a lot cooler that way if the print head stood still for the shot. And it's interesting because generally I always get this line up front for my prints, and this time I got a line in back here. So every project is probably different. If it's been sitting for 2 hours, it's fully cool, and it is not sticking at all. You see, it just came right off. I'm not sure how I feel about this because this is just a piece of plastic wasted, used to synchronize the smooth time lapse. Again, this plate is room temperature, and these things are not sticking at all. Look at this, watch. So if you're worried about damaging your PEI plate from stuff sticking, just let it come to room temperature and it just falls right off. This one came out great. I wish it was just a little deeper to accommodate the header pins. It actually doesn't fit, but that's not the point of this video. The point is that it was on the other setting, had no effect on it. We can see as I put both together, it came out absolutely fine, but be cognizant that when you pull those from the website, it could be set to the wrong type of printer. The other possibility is getting a program like FreeCAD and making your own stuff and printing it on the 3D printer. This is what I'm looking to do. A topic like this deserves an entire video or series of its own. Here's all the poops that get shot out the back every time it cleans the print head. I'll collect those along with the scraps and deliver it to our local maker group for recycling. So what we have in summary is fantastic print quality, fast printing. We do have a couple of quirks like the SD card in the software. I don't think that's a hardware issue per se. All 3D printers have learning curves, this is true, but does this 3D printer deliver and have the quickest time from unboxing to printing without tinkering and toying and getting the thing going? Yeah, it really does. It's meant to print, not to be played with or tinker with or adjust or fix or troubleshoot. It just prints. And that concludes my review of this Bambu P1P 3D printer. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below. Helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. When the next video comes out in this series, a link will be posted in the top right corner. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.